about 3 weeks ago, as the Easter holidays were drawing to a close, I received a direct message from a tweeter arguing that my ideas about nourishing schools were the epitome of everything that was wrong with the school system, and stating that, like a cancer, they should be cut out. As you can imagine, when faced with such strong sentiment, I felt a little rocked. And I was moved to question momentarily whether this mission I have for nourishing schools was in some way a distraction, whether it was at odds with the purpose of education. And so I went back to basics. And I asked myself why. Why am I here? Why am I still here? Why did I choose this vocation of education? And the answer came back loud and clear. Because over successive years in successive schools, what has been demonstrated to me is that the thing I can most help with is bringing nourishment. I want to provide that which is necessary for life, for health, and for growth. Now, as a profession, it seems as though we've reached a stage of almost complete overwhelm. There is something so breathless, so panic-ridden about the pace of life in schools, a pace to a certain extent governed by the pace of school policy change, and to a certain extent governed by the need to demonstrate constant improvement within a context in which it's clear that we need to do more with less. Overwhelm is felt in all aspects of school life. Teachers feel overwhelmed by the constant pressure to be brilliant teachers, to be fantastic tutors, to be outstanding leaders. There are frequent scrutinies of marking, of lessons, of progress. And alongside all of this, some of us even want to be good friends, good family members, maybe even a good parent. The profession has ceased to feel like a place in which it is safe to be judicious, in which to choose wisely to do little, but do that little well. Instead, it's an acquisitive environment. It's one in which we seek to accumulate, and many of us drown in the volume of what is accumulated. I wonder, for some of our children, if this constant drive we've had for embracing every initiative that passes us by means that for them in the classroom, overwhelm is also manifest at a much earlier age. The stakes have been articulated as being so high and for so long that for students, for teachers, for leaders, failure just does not seem to be an option. We are connected, aren't we, to the next village? We are connected by the power of the internet to the way the next village does things. We know how well the school down the road performed. Our children know how well the child next door performed. And so for many of us, there is nothing we can do but keep striving, often failing, keep striving for more, feeling ever more the imposter, and it's quite simply overwhelming. And this is why I come back to the idea of nourishment. To nourish is to provide that which is necessary for life, health, and growth. So imagine this. Imagine if in our schools, educators at all levels took steps to address their own feelings of overwhelm, paying as much attention to this as we do to so many aspects of our work life. Imagine if, crucially, we try to change the culture of our schools, tipping the balance from a if you can't measure it, you can't manage it culture, to a if you can't manage it as a human being, you can't manage it in other people. Imagine if we were proactive about dealing with overwhelm. If we named it, if we identified it, and we took steps to try and reduce it in our organizations. Imagine the excitement of working in a school that talked about overwhelm. Imagine knowing that your leaders, rather than walking away awkwardly from your own signs of overwhelm, would walk towards you and compassionately embrace it, offer to share your burden. Now, as well as witnessing overwhelm in our schools, I think most of us as teachers and leaders are witnessing unprecedented levels of stress, anxiety, and overall mental disorder. As a head teacher, I know that our staff are not across the sector always happy. We read daily stories in the papers of the challenges faced by newly qualified teachers, challenges that have them quite quickly considering alternative professions. We hear with regularity from experienced teachers for whom the pressure of the job makes it feel like it's a job that's no longer worth doing. We hear that there is a shortage in the pipeline of leaders, of head teachers, and this shortage is set against almost weekly stories of head teachers losing their jobs as a result of the incredibly high stakes that leadership in our sector now carries. In our schools, the mental and spiritual health of our staff meets the mental and spiritual health of our children. Children growing up in exceptional times, times that have seen rapid growth in communication. A growth in communication that means our children are almost perpetually switched on and allegedly connected, and yet they feel so paradoxically disconnected. And in fact, the mental health of our children makes the pages of certainly the educational literature on what feels like a daily basis. The school funding crisis underscores all of this, doesn't it? In the most challenging and upsetting of ways, setting out that in our schools we are ill-equipped to meet the growing dis-ease of children growing up in the 21st century. Anxiety, stress, depression, even suicide, these are features of life in our schools. And so it's quite clear that across a whole range of indicators on so many levels, our schools are not always well places. And so why do I keep coming back to this idea of nourishment? To nourish, to provide that which is necessary for life, health, and growth. Imagine this. Imagine if in our schools, our leaders committed to ensuring the mental and spiritual health of everyone in the school community, demonstrating that mental ill health, disorder, stress and anxiety have no place in our schools. They do not reflect the culture of our schools. Perhaps, with this in mind, we would queue up our inset days, our assemblies, our lessons, with an insistence, if not an invitation, that everybody get into the right mental frame of mind. Maybe we would use the evidence from countless pieces of research on the benefits of mindfulness, of meditation, of inner work, of stillness to support us. Maybe those strategies would not be cut out like a cancer, but would be applied as a healing salve to heal our school's ills. Now, the thing is, we cannot manage what we cannot manage. For this to work in schools, we as leaders have to model our own mental and spiritual well-being. We have to feel confident enough to talk openly about the strategies that we use, the support that we gather in to strengthen our leadership. This is really simple. But for some of us in our schools, it's really brave work. And I think for all of us, it's just a tiny bit radical. We are working in a system that has been relatively decentralized, and yet many of us are still feeling the effects of top-down pressure and this sense in schools of ceaseless implementation. There are definitely freedoms in the system, and yet it's a heavily regulated system too. forgotten where I am. We all know, I'm not going to use their name, but we all know the outcome of what happens in our classroom. We all know that our outcomes are heavily scrutinised by external bodies and forces. And you could argue that the effect of the inspection regime that we're subject to in education has been to erode autonomy in our sector. I actually think that autonomy has quite deliberately been chipped away at all levels of the education system, and also that there has been an insistent and a pernicious undermining of the unique gifts and talents and riches that individuals can bring to our school communities. People are penalised, aren't they, if they fail to achieve within a very narrow parameter of what good looks like. And the effect of this is that our children don't trust in their innate abilities, and that the staff in our schools fail to trust in their wisdom, in their own judgment. We want independent, autonomous, creative, thinking children, but we cannot manage what we cannot manage. So imagine this. Imagine if as school leaders we committed to finding opportunities to give rise to the wisdom innate in our schools, building communities that were rich in autonomy, communities that celebrated the individual strengths and gifts and talents that everybody has to offer. Imagine if our response to the challenges in school funding were to tap the resources that we have in our schools, if our response to the erosion of services in our schools was to ask our members of school community what they have to offer. Imagine the transformative effect on well-being for our staff to know that not only are they valued, they are needed, they are necessary, they have something to offer. And imagine people's willingness to want to do more with that knowledge in mind. To nourish is to provide that which is necessary for life, health, and growth. As educators, many of us have been called, and we've been called to serve. But we cannot manage what we cannot manage. It's our job to provide ourselves with that which is necessary for life, for health, and for growth, in order that we can work most beneficially with all of those people around us. To have the integrity to witness the overwhelming conditions of life in our schools and normalize that for other people. To demonstrate the kindness that is needed to mitigate the ill effects of stress and anxiety in our workplaces. And to commit to cultivating the wisdom needed to bring about autonomy. These are just 3 ways of nourishing our schools. Whatever we choose to do, we have an opportunity, and I would say a gift of an opportunity. We also have a responsibility, because it must be argued that in the times we are in now, there is no other priority. Thank you.